In today's episode, we're going to talk about the thin blue line, why it matters, where it came from, and why police should not be willing to give it up to bad actors. Hope you enjoy it.
Legal disclaimer time. The opinions shared on Priority Air are those of Rob Farrer, Chris Voller, and whoever we conned into speaking with us this week. To be clear, they don't necessarily represent those of any organization you may associate with us, but they do represent honest conversation, a bit of humor, and a lot of heart. Enjoy the episode, you guys. Thanks for listening.
All units, please stand by. Rob Farrer and Chris Voller have Priority Air. Go ahead, the channel is yours.
I'm Rob. I've been a cop for 24 years, and just to be very clear, this is my opinion and Chris's opinions. This does not reflect on any specific organization. This is just a couple of guys who have been cops for a long time that think there are some important things that need to be talked about in the police culture.
Yeah, my name's Chris Voller, friends with Rob, and again, we've had a lot of really good conversations in private and over beers. And one of the biggest things I think that comes out of that is how come nobody's talking about these things publicly? And we want to kind of introduce these conversations and normalize them, because a lot of the things in policing that get villainized or misunderstood or misrepresented come from a lack of us having a voice in this arena. And so Rob and I's choice, our passion, is advocacy for police in general. And today we're going to bring up the thin blue line, which is a cultural thing, I would say, for police. I think that it is a part of our culture, and it's a part of our culture that has been taken away from us, or people are trying to take it away from us. And for those of you who don't police or who don't understand that, we're going to kind of go through what it means to us versus what the social media or the mainstream media may have tried to tell you it means from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a good setup of what it is. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of where it even came from, or at least as I understand it, because I want to be clear. Some of these things, it's like challenge coins. Maybe we'll do an episode on challenge coins at some point. The history of these things is not necessarily super clear. But my understanding is, and sort of what is out there with respect to the thin blue line, is that it actually didn't even start as a police concept, and it wasn't a blue line. It was actually the Crimean War, not the recent one, but a little bit before that, like in the 1800s. And it was actually the thin red line, and it was a military band, essentially, who was blocking the Russians, and they called it the thin red line. And that's sort of where it came from. It got popularized in policing in about 1950s by the LAPD chief at the time, who used it very regularly. And the idea, and this is my understanding, Chris, correct me if you have heard differently or see it differently, but it's sort of the line between chaos and order. If you want to say it's that the police are the thin blue line. This is where it came from. The thin blue line that separate good from evil, if you want to say that. It's the police are there to protect people from those segments of society that want to do harm to them, and that it's that line. It's a positive symbol. So that is sort of where I'm coming at on this. This is a positive symbol. This is something that I think we should be celebrating. You know, we want people to realize and to have the thought, in my mind at least, that they are there to help protect. Like, that is a huge part. Serve and protect. So that's sort of where it comes from my perspective. It's that line that separates good from bad, and that is not to say that police are better than or anything of that nature. It is simply a line that separates and that is there to protect people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Rob. I think that's exactly what it is. You take a piece of paper, draw a line through it, and one half of the page is this, and one half of the page is that. And in the most simplistic way, you could write good on one side and evil on the other, and the only thing stopping it is that line. Now, with respect to, is good and bad that black and white? Certainly not. We know that. But it's imagery right? It's there. And not only is that what we go out each shift to do, which is to protect people, to do our best to shield them from the other half, it also represents our fallen, right? This is a vocation, I think, that unlike many, you can anticipate some of your friends will be murdered at work.
Yep.
And I don't know there are many other organizations that have something with that level of symbolism. And I don't want to shit on anyone or take anything away from them. But I don't know that people at TELUS look at the TELUS symbol and think, yeah, that's it. That's what this is about today. I'm going to get these people to sign up for a long distance plan. We're just going to do it. We're going to make this happen.
Yeah.
But in policing, when we look at the blue line, it represents friends you've lost. It represents your mission to keep people safe, to have that level of separation. But let's not conflate separation with division.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where the politics come in, right, Rob?
Well, it's interesting. So, symbols. Why do symbols exist? We have a flag in this country, right? We have the Canadian flag. What's the purpose of that? Like it is we all are united as Canadians, right? That is one group. And while there are many, many police organizations, right? There's several hundred in Canada alone. Never mind internationally. There's thousands in the States that are international. And we all, of course, represent that specific service. And that's great. But I think one of the things that the thin blue line does as a positive is it is ubiquitous across policing, right? Everybody knows what it means. Everybody in policing knows what it means. There were some factions, we'll get into that wanted to sort of take that away because people, had that at different rallies that were negative. We can talk about some of those. I don't recall any in Canada though. So we have this cultural thing where you see something that happens in another country that perhaps was negative and certainly in some cases was negative. And then people try to take that away. But at the end, what it means is it's that symbolism of unity. And I think it's very important that people see themselves as something other than just an individual doing a job, right? I think we want people to see themselves as part of a greater thing than just themselves. And that's part of that symbolism that matters. It's not so simple as to just say, well, it doesn't matter. It's just a symbol. It's just a shirt. It's just a flag, whatever. I don't think it's that. I think it's far more important than that.
Yeah. And it, again, about bringing people together, and a flag defines your nation. But I would say south of me is Washington. And I would see a thin blue line on a Washington state member, and I would see one on my uniform. And we're from different countries, but we believe in the same thing, which is keeping people safe. It is putting yourself on the line for people you don't even know. The thin blue line unites people. I struggle with the idea that it's divisive, and to go down that road a little bit where people are saying, yeah, it's negative, or we're going to villainize this. But I would take the same analogy and say, well, you could do that with anything. I can misappropriate the Canadian flag. I can misappropriate the American flag. I can take many symbols that were very positive and turn them into something terrible.
Yeah.
Why is it that in our job, in our vocation, it's been allowed to have that conversation with a thin blue line to be villainized, and then no one really standing up for it?
Yeah, so we could take that. So the Freedom Convoy, and I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but clearly the symbol that they used was the Canadian flag. So are we going to ban the Canadian flag because people disagreed or agreed? And it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is people were using the Canadian flag as a symbol, and during that period, people saw trucks with those. There were a lot around the Okanagan, right? Trucks with Canadian flags flying everybody.
And a message to the Prime Minister.
Well, there was a message usually on the back of those trucks. It said something about Trudeau. But, we didn't ban the Canadian flag. We didn't have groups calling for banning the Canadian flag. People realized what that was, and and they're like, okay, well, that doesn't represent all of Canada. And again, I'm not getting into the positive, negative, whatever the convoy. That's not the point of it. It's that symbols, one group trying to take something and make it mean something that it didn't, doesn't make it so. And I think it's important that you don't give that up. You don't cede the territory simply because someone wants to. So some of the places they talked about, January 6th, apparently there was someone that flew a thin blue line flag there. I don't know. Charlottesville, somebody apparently or flew a thin blue line flag there, perhaps. But there were probably also people wearing blue jeans at those and people wearing hats. So you just by virtue of something being present at an event doesn't necessarily mean that it becomes the symbol of that event and that it's a negative symbol. That is not what it is. So to have a bad actor use it in that manner, I think we can't allow it to be taken. I guess my position is you cede that territory, and it has a negative effect. It has the good men and women, which is virtually all of them that do policing, feel that negative of that. And how does that help society? How does giving that symbol up? So you've had some places that have actually banned it, full out ban. Like you can't put it on a duty bag, you can't have it on your uniform. Lots of them have it on. You can't have it in a uniform, but they're banning it completely. Like you can't have it, period, as an officer. And to my mind, that has nothing but a negative effect. I don't see that creating, what do you want to call it, reconciliation with different groups. Like, I don't see that. I don't know if you see it differently there, Chris, but I think we just can't give up that territory.
No, I don't disagree with you. I mean, I would take the same one. So a lot of groups have spoken out against it, saying that they felt it was exclusionary against them. And I take the same analogy. So I recognize Indigenous communities as sovereign nations. And so if each one of those reservations, tribes, groups are their own nation, then the Canadian flag obviously would be oppressive or offensive. And to the same group, the thin blue line may or may not be. I can tell you this, when I was a corporal in an isolated post, I actually spent a little bit of time, we did award ceremonies every year there where the local detachment honored people from our community with an artwork and a ceremony. So I would, out of wood, build pictures. And in this case, I took the Canadian flag and I made it a thin blue line Canadian flag. And then on the inside of the maple leaf, I carved out orcas. And the orcas were ordained with the Indigenous artwork that the local nation did. And the origin story of the Kwakwaka'wakw Wasanakala people was that they came from the water. They were all orcas. And then they came onto land and they started their community there. Now, when they see the orcas, it is seeing their ancestors, seeing those people. And I took the flag and I blended it because the thin blue line is my culture as a police officer. That's what I identify with.
Yeah.
And their origin story is that of an orca. And when we mixed the two and presented it at the ceremony, it was very, very well received because that's what it was. It was, again, just more symbolism. It's not the symbolism I had or the symbolism they had. It was a blending. But it's the intent and the spirit behind symbolism. And so with that same train of thought, it's very hard for me to come back and say why the thin blue line would be negative if it's about believing in your vocation and about thinking about your fallen comrades.
Yep. Yeah, no, and I'm nowhere near as artistic as you have seen your doodles. That's not nothing I could do, but symbolism's interesting because it can also go too far, and there's an interesting, there could become a subculture of symbols. Like the Punisher symbol is one that comes to mind for me. I wouldn't be super supportive of a bunch of cops having Punisher symbols on their uniforms, right? A death head. Now that's similar to the shirt. This is essentially the Punisher symbol. Now this happens to be a jiu-jitsu brand, War Tribe. That's all it is. It's a shirt with some art on it. But if you just took that head and put it on a police uniform with a thin blue line, I would be like, okay, like, does that still mean unity? I'm not so sure. Now, so we can go too far with that, 100%, and I've seen it. But that, because you can go too far with something, is not a reason to not allow the thing within parameters. So again, my position would be thin blue line is positive in policing. It means something to those officers. It gives them a way of sort of visibly demonstrating what they want to portray to the public. They want to be that person that can help separate the two parties. Lieutenant Dave Grossman wrote a book years ago called, I believe it was On Combat, is the one that he wrote, where he talked about the sheepdog. And I used to have a gym, own a gym with a good buddy of mine, Sebastian Lebois, and we called it actually Sheepdog CrossFit. And I won't talk about CrossFit too much because that cult goes sideways sometimes. In any case, we took that symbol, right? Like the sheepdog, which is very similar. It's the same idea. It was separating the sheep, not in a negative way, calling people sheep, but just the regular people going about their business, going about their lives, and the wolves, which are those trying to intent on doing them harm, whether it's military setting or police setting. The symbolism's the same, and the sheepdogs are those police or military that are trying to keep the two apart, trying to keep the sheep safe from the wolves. And that's exactly the same as the thin blue line. So, like, for me, this is something that I've for decades have thought is very, very important and only positive.
Yeah, I think it is not political, it's personal,
Yeah.
right? I think, again, anyone is allowed to take their assumption or their perception over something and put it forward. But you really would need to talk to the group of people who believe in it to ask them what they think of. And I've yet to hear police officers come up to me and tell me that this is wrong, or we don't want to believe in something that honors our fallen comrades. Are there outliers to anything? To your point about the Punisher, sure. I think that character in reference is also a vigilante who takes justice into his own hands, and he's rough and tumble, etc. That wouldn't be what we as police are into. I think law, order, due process, we believe in those things. The thin blue line is, again, simply something that just shows to our people, you go out there, it's for a reason. I don't want to go give my life for nothing. I don't want to go risk bodily harm, the loss of my limbs for nothing. And you can look at that and think, I'm a part of something bigger. I'm a part of this, family, if you will. And it's not a Canadian family. It's not the RCMP. It's not police forces in Canada. It's international. And the thin blue line is just one symbol that unites our group, our culture. And I, again, struggle with the idea that we have these individuals who want to take that and vilify it. And then for us, not to come out and say, no, you're wrong. What has happened is we've acquiesced and everyone's just kind of folded and said, yeah, we don't need to have that. If it's controversial, we'll just back away from it. But to your point, this is at least 70 years old from LAPD when it goes blue. Prior to that, the same line was being used in a different way, but it predates any of the arguments that are taking place now with respect to why it should go. It started as something to bring people together, and there's no reason that the spirit of that should be lost based on somebody who wanted to get a radio bite in, or somebody who wanted to be in a news clip, or somebody who was trying to leverage that to further an argument of a different political base, because this becomes fodder for larger arguments. It's not actually about the blue line, I don't think. It's usually just added weight to the argument of someone who's driving towards a different point.
Yeah. I'm quite convinced it's nothing to do with the blue line. And one of the arguments I'll use for that is I don't hear a lot of people complaining about the thin red line that represents firefighters. That also exists. That is a thing. It's a symbol they use, probably not as commonly as the thin blue line, but very commonly. And I've yet to hear people in society talk about the negative of firefighters, having that. Now, I understand politically, there's no comparison between firefighters and police. Fair enough. They're there to solely help put out fires, and the bad outcomes, don't often involve with them potentially taking a life. So I understand that the political side of that is not the same, but I guess that goes to the point that it's not the symbol. It has nothing to do with the thin, whatever colored line. It has to do with people using it. And I think my biggest issue is similar to one that you just raised, is that I think when we give up those things, it is to our peril. It is to our, it's detrimental to those people that are doing the job. At the end of the day, the decisions to give it up, quote unquote, are taken by people who don't own it. Like, I don't own it. No police service owns it. Yet they're the ones that feel like they can give it up on behalf of the men and women doing the work. And I don't think that's right. It's not, if they were to ban the Punisher symbol on a shirt, I'll use that one again. I'm okay with that. I actually am. I don't think that represents good. But I do think that the thin blue line does represent good. And I think if we sort of take the idea that we do, that identity and group identity matters. One of the things that comes along frequently in group identity is symbolism. And this is one that is a positive, period. Some of the bad actors, as I've said before, that have had it in, present at rallies, they shouldn't be, right? And I think that's the point, is call them out for their use of it. Say, that is not what this represents. Do that. But don't target those who are using it as a symbol of unity, as a symbol of remembering the sacrifices that their friends have made. And I haven't talked enough about that, but that's a huge piece of it, is the recognition of that. Like, there's no cops that I know that have been around for any length of time, and I'll say 5 years or more almost, who don't know someone who has had a very negative outcome as a result of their profession. And that's very frequently death, whether that's suicide or being killed. And never mind the mental health issues and all sorts of challenges that also come. So I think, back to your point, we cannot allow people to just give up symbols that are positive. We just can't do it, because then what are you left with?
This morning I was speaking with Sherry Lux, who is a widow of a member who died by suicide. And Sherry and I were having a really good conversation about, what's changing, what's culturally changing. Are things getting better for policing in general? Are we having more conversations about mental health? Are we having more conversations about how we can support one another? And one of the things that comes up is that sense of family. Like, as a widow, Sherry expressed to me afterwards, she was very fortunate to have the people in her life to surround her after that incident, which obviously is devastating to them. But their family is bigger than just the immediate kind of nuclear family, if you will. When you join policing, we look at our family a different way. And again, not to use this session to bang on people from TELUS, but I don't think that people in many vocations and many jobs feel the same way about their coworkers. Hey, you're a member, you're from Saskatchewan, you need a spot to stay, you're coming through. Yeah, just put it into the chat group and see if you can stay at someone's house.
Yeah.
I bet you can.
Yeah.
The loss of a members we wear mourning ribbon, and that's accepted by everyone. And the difference is that ribbon is associated specifically to the death of someone. And it's not a straight line, it's a curled line. But I don't hear politicians jumping up and down at that point. Usually they have one on, in fact. And I don't know if they're obtuse to the idea that that's also a blue line. I mean, obviously we know that, we understand that. But how is it okay at that point that they stand up, give a eulogy, talk about what a hero that individual was, all the contributions, but then the next day they take it off and they'll do an interview to say why that shouldn't be there?
Yeah. Yeah, and if we look at when it happened, so there's a big, obviously during the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd and the aftermath, that was really when this became a big discussion. Again, really started in the States. But a question got asked of, the commissioner of the RCMP at the time, and she struggled with the answer, to be very, very clear. But that's one of the comments that was made, was that it was a negative symbol by our own leaders. And I'm not quite sure. I don't know whether it was a lack of understanding or if it was just at that time and too frequently, it was just sort of to appease a group. And it feels very much like it's simply appeasement. It's, well, rather than explaining and having the discussion, if we just, it doesn't really matter, or there's not enough thought given to it, or I'm not sure exactly what the thought process, but it feels like just appeasement. And just because someone is upset or a group is upset, and in many cases rightfully so, right? I'm not going to, I'm not judging the reason a group is upset. Fine, they're upset. But that doesn't mean they're right. And appeasing doesn't always work. I have 3 kids, and on occasion they've been upset about it. But simply giving into what they're upset about doesn't generally have a positive outcome. You can't just appease for appeasement's sake, because it just moves to the next thing. You haven't actually solved the issue. If you want to solve the issue, was the thin blue line the issue? Like, is that what we're saying then? Are we saying that symbol was the reason that George Floyd happened? Is that it? Or Ferguson? Are we saying that it was the thin blue line that led to this cultural change and whatever in another country, and therefore we should get rid of it? I don't think so. I think that is simply a very simplistic knee-jerk reaction response to something that is incredibly complex. Like social issues and the police response to social issues, like that's a fairly big conversation. But I'm pretty confident that the thin blue line is not the reason that there's homelessness. Like I'm relatively confident that the thin blue line is not the reason that we have a fentanyl crisis, and that is not the reason. So we can't just have a knee-jerk reaction. Okay, now we're just going to ban this, and now all is well. Doesn't work.
Yeah, I don't know many other cultures where you take away a symbol that is something they believe in and it's gone well, or just in history.
Yeah.
Trying to ban things people believe in is usually to the detriment of everyone involved in whatever situation it is they were trying to resolve. And to your point, yeah, when has the thin blue line killed someone? I can think of the opposite. I can think of when it saved lives. And when I say that, I mean the idea that people think they're part of something bigger, that they can rely on something, that though times are hard right now for them, whether it be that specific call or whether it's at home, that they can look at that and think, okay, I've got someone who's got my 6. I'm a part of something. I'm doing something. This hard day was worth something. That saves lives. But when we go to this political appeasement, as you kind of suggested, and as I agree with you, what are we doing? We're just giving up something with the hope that the actual problem will be addressed, when we haven't talked about socioeconomic disadvantage, The George Floyd thing, again, timing wise, you're right. Canada adopted this, born out of the United States. Yet, if I look around Canada right now, most people say things like elbows up and we're really different.
Yeah.
So, which is it?
Yeah. It's, I think, so to me, symbols are important. Like symbols are very important to me anyway. I think people think often in stories and symbols. I think that's how we as a culture work. But there's also this other part that is very important is the sense of trust in your leaders and your organizations. And I guess my bigger concern regarding this symbol is when it is when your leaders seem to side without even supporting it in any way, when they seem to side with whatever group is upset at that time, again, right or wrong, not judging why they're upset, but when they don't support the people doing the job, when the leaders don't come out and seem like they're supporting, then people lose faith in the leaders. They lose faith in the institutions. So now you're losing the people that are doing the job. They start losing faith, and I don't know what the reason is. I don't know why we have such a huge mental health issue in policing. I don't know what the exact answer is, but it's not simply that they're observing traumatic events or involved in traumatic events. It's not that straightforward. Um, it's something more than that. And I actually do think, and I don't know that I could ever prove this, and I'm certainly not a psychologist, barely past first year of university. Um, but I do think that there's a huge part of that is about the organizations themselves. And I don't pick one. I'm not picking one. All of them, virtually all of them, where they don't, we've talked about this before, where they don't back people up. But it's not just in the words of a specific file, it's in who they are. Like when that symbol, when it got, sort of taken away, I know a lot of people who felt like betrayed, pissed off, just angry. Like, who are they to say this? And so I think that has a huge negative effect where we don't want people to just see themselves as an individual doing a job. Policing can't be that. In my opinion, policing can't be that. It has to be something bigger. You have to see yourself as something bigger than just an individual going to work, because you have to be responsible for the people you work with and the greater society. And the more we make it about an individual, the worse it is for all of society, not for just the cops, but for everybody. We want people to see themselves as a group. We have to. That is so important.
I can't agree more in that point because, like, we are part of a team, and I hear the odd time where, like, you're one of the good ones, Chris, and that's perhaps one of the most insulting things I can hear from somebody is a suggestion that I am an exception to the rule of good police officers. Uh, we have so many people who go day in and day out, and they do their job very, very well, and they sacrifice a lot, days, nights, missed kids' events, missed holidays. And all they want is the opportunity to think, I'm a part of a bigger team. And it's super hard for me to say, okay, I'm going to identify with the buffalo on my arm, or I'm going to identify with
The bison,
the
just to be clear, that's a bison.
North American bison. Yes. The yellow stripe represents dismounted cavalry. All of the things. VPD, Peel. Like, if you believe in that specific thing, it is controlled by someone, right? It is controlled by an organization. And often we struggle with some of those leadership challenges, or we struggle with some of the things that are happening in that organization. I think for police officers, the thin blue line also represents something that isn't owned by senior leadership. It isn't owned by any form of politics. And when you aren't agreeing or investing in whatever shoulder flash you may have, we've always had that. And it came with a sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, family. and it represented the people we lost, and it couldn't be tainted by those that we would perhaps share different views with.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most important parts to me, is because I think a lot of people at the senior level just thought, well, now you believe in the bison. Well, I do. I believe in policing. I believe in many people in the organizations. But people are fallible. You'll have good ones, you'll have bad ones, you'll have some you agree with, some you don't. And it's much cleaner to have a symbol that isn't controlled by them and their actions. In fact, the thin blue line, what it means to you, is dictated by you. Whereas the other shoulder flashes or the other symbols, those individuals have power of control and sphere of influence over them. And often, as police officers, we are in an adversarial position with those on the street. And then internally, we take an adversarial position with some of the things that are happening in our senior leadership.
Yeah.
And the thin blue line aspect for me was just a safe place.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say there are some individuals in policing, some police officers, who see it differently, and that's fine. They're allowed to. They're allowed to see it differently. That's one of the lovely things in Western society is people don't all have to have groupthink. But the fact that there's an individual or a number of individuals who see it differently does not take away from what it is. Like, those things are not the same. Somebody can see something as very positive. The masses can see something as very positive, and an individual can see something not so positive. That's also fine. But that doesn't take away from the intent of the thing. That doesn't make it a negative symbol. And I think we just have to, I think we have to get back to what was the intent of this thing? What is the intent? Like, the intent was very clear. Is it in the 1950s? It was used quite frequently. Now, I wasn't around then, but in doing a little bit of research, it was the chief brought it up regularly in press conferences and all sorts of things about the thin blue line. Like, it was a positive thing, and then it spread. And I maintain it is still a positive thing. And there are some places in the States, I've been down there for a few conferences or different things. And there are places where it is still seen as very positive. So I don't want to make it sound like it's just gone altogether. It's not, and it's not gone. To be very clear, I know I've got a flag in my gym, thin blue line flag there. I've got some shirts. I've got lots of stuff, and I think that's pretty commonplace. So as much as there's been an attempt to downplay it or get rid of it, it's not so straightforward that you can just do that, because again, nobody owns it. Nobody can just say it's ours. Back to your point, they can't. Now, they can dictate what goes on the uniform, and I take no exception to that, as it should be. I think what goes on the uniform is different, but to vilify it and to make it into some sort of symbol of negativity, I'm not okay with that. Not in the least, for some of the reasons we've already expressed. I think it hurts the morale of an organization very much. The military, they call them morale patches. Like, a morale patch. There's like literally called with morale in the word. So to take away that thing, you would think would probably not have a positive effect.
Stop applying logic.
Well, yeah.
Agreed. And trying to drive the thin blue line out of what they say is like mainstream and turn it into a subculture, I think it's just a failed attempt. If people think that for some reason we are just going to disassociate ourselves from something that we believe wholeheartedly in, and as a group of people recognize as something that our comrades have given their lives for, and we continue to go to work with the understanding that we could be giving our lives for it, we're probably not just going to let that go.
Yeah, it's not so simple. Yeah.
And again, at the expense of the real conversation, which is there are issues in some of these theaters and arenas that this conversation's arisen from. But we've just gone with the low-hanging fruit to be like, get rid of that symbol, but don't address any of the substantive issues. How is that the way forward?
Yeah, and and every community has different issues. The issues in Minneapolis are not the same as Nanaimo. I think that's fair. Um, but you have to address those issues. I think that's a great point. Is to me this the approach, the tack that was taken, this sort of vilifying it was did absolutely nothing to change. If there was a negative culture, I don't know if there is, but if a specific police force has a negative culture, whatever that is, whatever that means, I haven't seen it in those that I've seen. It may exist. It probably does exist. I've seen enough movies. Maybe the Deep South there's some. I don't know, but I haven't seen it. And certainly in the Canadian context, the training, the professionalism of the police officers here, like it is to a standard that is world renowned. Like people come to training facilities in Canada from all over the world to see what we do to train our cops. Like we have a incredible, varied, different, but a number of police services that 130, 140 some that are fantastic across this country that do a fantastic job. So I think the individuals, if somebody steps out of line, they should absolutely dealt with. But I would never say anything different than that. We have to make sure that maintains. But the knee-jerk reaction and jump to, well, here, we'll ban this symbol and then it all will be good again. I understand the mentality. To me, the mentality goes something like this. It's like, okay, so negative thing happens, whatever that negative thing is. Is there a subculture within our organization that led to this negative outcome where the person was dehumanized? Maybe. Okay. Well, we have this symbol that is like everybody thinks is the same. So maybe the symbol is the reason why they see themselves as different than society and therefore are dehumanizing that person. Like I completely disagree with the premise. I understand the thinking. Like I see how you could make that leap, but I think leap is the operative word. I think that is such a giant leap, and that was not the cause. Like I think if you end up in that situation where, you go to the Stanley Park 6 when that happened years and years ago, I don't think that was the entire Vancouver police force, right? Like it clearly wasn't. You deal with that. You deal with that small subculture within the subculture. Like we have those examples. Fine, deal with them. But this is, as we said, this is a symbol that's across policing. This is not a symbol that was with one unit. And if it's across policing and means one thing, someone misusing it should be dealt with. But that doesn't mean you ban the whole thing.
Yeah, so if Kanye is on one of his tangents and doing his crazy shit that he's been doing, and he's wearing Nike shoes,
Yeah.
Are Nike shoes gone?
Yeah. Yes.
I guess the other thing I would say, and you use this kind of an analogy, or when you, as a parent, were dealing with your children and you told them not to do something, what was the general outcome of that?
When I just told them, it depends on the kid. One of them would listen. One of them, it would be immediate pushback.
Yeah. Do you think the thin blue line has actually been more ingratiated into our culture as a result of this? I mean, I can say for sure, the day after some of those directives came out, I wish I had been one of those people on Amazon selling a thin blue line flag.
100%. And yeah, it's funny because I don't think there's been a positive from it, period. In fact, it's all been negative. So you may see it a little bit less in some places. But you're creating this even within the forces, even within the police services. There's a bit of a more of a divide. right? There's those who are like, pound sand. I'm still doing this because this is not a symbol you own. You can't tell me not to have it on my T-shirt underneath my uniform, or on my duty bag, or whatever, wherever they happen to put it. You're not telling me that. Well, that's not a culture we want either. Like, we don't. Policing has to be command and control. It has to be. When you go to a major event, whatever that thing is, let's say you're go to a shooting. No, I don't think that's a good approach, boss. I think I should go to this side and he should go there. Like, could you imagine the debates at a shooting? No, boss, I know you told me to do this, but and we're going to spend 10 minutes to decide the best approach. And no. That can't happen. It has to be command and control. And I think when you use your authority to do something that makes the masses say, really? Then I think it undermines your own leadership. And that does not have a positive effect. A good example would be if the government orders the flight attendants back to work and they say, screw you, we're staying off. Like, I don't remember that happening before, but that's a pretty big thing. That's a pretty big step to say pound sand, because I think it's been this sort of chip at their authority, at their own authority. There's been a chip. People are questioning because of stupid decisions. And then all of a sudden, one that, right or wrong, pretty commonplace. We've seen this happen many, many times. They get ordered back, they go back. No, not right now. And I think the same thing, the same premise is here, where you chip at your own moral authority, which, when you chip away at your moral authority, you also chip away at your legal authority. Not legally, but in people's minds. They don't see them necessarily as two completely separate things. And I think we are seeing a little bit more of that questioning of leadership that isn't necessarily positive. And those are self-inflicted wounds and unnecessary ones.
The idea that our leadership across Canada, I'm just trying to think as you're talking there, I don't know that any police leader came out and said, no, leave it alone. You're wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't know that any politician stuck up for it either. Which is odd to me because many politicians come from a policing background. I know MPs, I know MLAs, I know a couple good senators, and shy of the senators, I would have hoped one of the MPs or the MLAs stood up. No one did.
No.
And I guess to go full circle on this conversation, that's why you and I are now trying to have these conversations and normalize it, because without introducing this information to people, how can they make decisions?
Yeah.
If you take one source of news, one perception, and there's no counter to it, you really don't get to make up your own mind. You simply adopt their thoughts. At least here, we can provide people with a police perspective, with a police culture, and then let intelligent people come to their own conclusions.
Yeah, 100%. I think I've done one of those personality tests, and I'm very low in agreeableness, which is not surprising. But one of the things, I bring in the information, give me the information, let me make a good decision. Don't just tell me the answer. I'm not interested. And I think this is one of the things what new media, I think, is doing, is providing people with more information. Whereas it seems like traditional media is more, here's the answer. And I don't think that's as positive. I think we have a lot of incredibly smart people. Most people are well, I don't know if most people are very smart, but there's a ton of them out there who are. And I think provided with the information, most people will make the right decision. I think when you gloss over and only provide one angle, and this was a one-angled discussion. There's no question. Starting in whatever year it sort of started, like the mid, late 2016, 2017, 2018, like through there, it just became negative. It was, this is a negative symbol. This is a negative symbol. And they'll pick out a snapshot of where it happened to be. They don't pick out, there's how many cops? There's 65,000 cops in Canada, something in that nature. Many of them sporting thin blue line things throughout history. Like they've had it for a long time. And the symbols that they found, none of them were from Canada. The negative attention that was garnered, 0 examples were provided in Canada. They were all international. And there were like 3. And they took those 3 and they said, this is now the story. These are now why this symbol is bad. Thin blue line equals bad became the narrative without any discussion. There was no discussion on it. It was simply, it's bad. And I'm hoping that people will take a listen and make their own minds. My perspective, I think Chris's perspective, we've been pretty clear on our perspective. And I think that's a pretty commonly held belief in policing generally. But ultimately, people should make up their own minds.
So we thank everyone for your time today, listening to us. Just a couple shift talkers here going through stuff, and we hope we can catch a chord, relate to you a little bit. We also have a email address, which is priority.air@gmail.com. Priority.air podcast@gmail.com. Priority Air podcast@gmail.com. And we would love to hear from you. Thoughts, things that you would like to hear us talk about, perspectives. Like maybe we missed it. Maybe we were out in left field and the two of us have just been drinking each other's bathwater and we don't know what's going on anymore. I'm happy to hear that too. But we would like to bring attention to issues that matter to police. And we're not afraid to have a voice publicly, which I think is something that in this arena, members, irrespective of your force, you need.
Yep, 100%. And hopefully we'll get that email somewhere embedded so people can read it as well. And yeah, love to hear from people. And thanks very much.
10:35.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about the thin blue line.